Welcome to Absolutely Fabulous. My name is Gillian Fennell, also known as Station Mum 101. I love everything about agriculture, especially the people and especially communicating about what makes Australian ag so special.
And I'm Katja Williams, a beef, cattle and cropping farmer, and I love all things ag, and I'm also known as the ultimate farm wife. Together, we are absolutely fabulous, and we are talking all things agriculture beyond the headlines.
And we can't wait to give our opinion to you, and we hope you enjoy it.
So let's get into today's episode. Welcome to episode 8 of Absolutely Fabulous. We are talking renewable energy, the future and the recyclability of the plans, and the food pyramid today. But before we jump into everything, Gillian, tell me what's been happening on the farm. If you're watching on the video podcast, guys, you can see she's in her new kitchen.
I'm in the kitchen today because we started school last week and Eleanor's on a lesson right now. So luckily she's well broken into being an independent learner. So she's quite happy in the schoolroom by herself while I do my little bit of entertainment for my day. We've just finished mustering, which didn't exactly go to plan, but, we made a start. Mark's taken the first load of cattle down to our other farm in the Flinders Ranges. So be aware that there are some lighter trade steers and heifers about to hit the market. Contact your local agent if you're looking for nice, quiet cattle that will go straight on to feed. They're ready and available, and we can arrange transport if necessary. So you know how to find us. Photos and videos will be being uploaded to my personal socials soon. But yeah, other than that, it was really lovely. I had all the kids home for the first time in a long time. My eldest brought his girlfriend home for a couple of weeks, and she's a really lovely, really handy girl. And I really like that. She's obviously, and her parents and her sisters came for a visit as well, which was a bit unusual for me, but they're lovely people too. And also they run a fruit and veg wholesaler, so they brought the biggest box of fresh fruit and vegetable, which was amazing, and we ate it all in the first 3 days, so that was great. But she's very, very good with boundaries and good with communication, and that's so refreshing. And I've always sworn that I will not be the same sort of mother-in-law that others may have been in the past, and I want to break that cycle. And they're only 18, so I'm not hearing wedding bells or anything yet, but it was a good trial. So yeah. So what are you up to, Katja? You must be getting into harvest, hay cutting time.
We are heading into hay. So from now right through until autumn, we will cut hay every 6 to 8 weeks off our centre pivot irrigation system. And so that will set sort of the pace. We've decided we're not going to harvest this year. We are going to strip graze off the rest of the paddocks and bale for hay. We've also just sent summer cattle away for adjustment. So that sort of says our stocking numbers are probably a little bit higher than we'd like them, but we're hoping it's still going to be a good season, but preparing just in case. We've finished up our AI programs for the year, which is great. Always good to try and get that sorted within a really tight time frame. Let me see. That sort of brings us to where we're full circle with the farm, and then with the Ultimate Farm Wife, the episode going live this week is with Lou from Rove Numby, who was a 5th generation sheep farmer from out west, and she has married her husband Dave, and they've moved to above the Lachlan River near Reeds Flat, New South Wales, and started their agro-tourism business to run alongside their farm. So they're evaluating these amazing luxury walks, dining and accommodation experiences on farm, which is a really lovely creative outlet for her. They've got young kids, so fantastic to hear about that. That'll be live by the time this is live as well.
I once knew a lady, I still know her, obviously she hasn't passed away or anything, but this is from back in Queensland, so she was one of the first people who decided that she's going to set up a farm stay, and this was probably 30 odd years ago now. And I said to her, I'm like, how could you possibly deal with tourists all the time? And she's like, you just make your prices high enough so that you can just tolerate it. And she said, once you're dealing with those high paying individuals, she said it makes it a lot easier. She said, now I've got a pool and a spa and a brand new kitchen in my house. And every time someone wants to be difficult, I just think about the new deck that I'm going to build. And so, you know, it's agrotourism is not for everyone, but I think if you're that type of person, there's a big appetite out there for people who want to come and experience, you know, life on the land and relax and disconnect and that sort of thing. And we have the land and we have the space. So if that interests you, be sure to tune into Kutch's podcast to get the inside tips.
Absolutely. Lou was also explaining how some of the, you know, the negatives of moving on farm or moving to different terrains and things like that can then become positives, particularly when you're like, oh, I'm used to the flat country and I've moved to the hills. Well, okay, I enjoy walking in the hills now, so let me share that experience with everyone else. But before we even jump into our topics, I have two questions for you, Gillian. First, I think we need a car update because last time we heard Adelaide.
It's still in Adelaide, still not fixed. But I have now made contact with the service manager at CMI, and he is a lovely man, and he assures me that everything's going to be going as quickly as possible now. And he's not happy with the service I've received, which is great because I was very unhappy. So CMI have taken my concerns on board and are addressing that appropriately. Still no car though. But so yeah, we do have the old, you know, diesel manual Hilux, like, so I'm not completely isolated, but it's not as much fun as driving around in my Prado, I can tell you.
Yes, I can agree with that. And I'm sure that some of our listeners will want to know how you went with the gluten-free catering for your boyfriend's girlfriend while she was there. You said they've been there and given, you know, that side of the update, but I'm interested to know about the gluten-free food.
Well, it wasn't too bad because when her parents came, because they're also gluten-free and dairy-free, so that was an extra challenge. I know. I don't know how you do it. At least they could eat eggs though. So, you know, it was pretty easy. We just did a lot of roast meat and veggies. And they quite kindly brought some gluten-free gravy powder because I didn't have, you know, gluten-free gravy powder, obviously. I could have made it from scratch, but I don't really have time for that shenanigans. And I found out that the cheapest Coles brand custard powder, gluten-free. I didn't know that until I started reading the label on everything. Not dairy-free though, so her parents and other sisters couldn't eat it, but she does. So that was fine. I could still make dessert. And there's some really good packet cakes actually in the gluten-free, dairy-free sort of genre. I made a really nice devil's food cake. Betty Crocker was the brand. They're not cheap, but you know, if you want to crack one out for a special occasion. And other than that, you know, we had gluten-free pasta. It's not my favorite, but once you like cover it up with heaps of meat sauce, you can barely tell the difference. And if it's like our family, like the pasta's basically just an addition. It's more about the meat sauce. So we weren't eating that much of it anyway. And yeah, it's you know, I've never had anything to do with catering or having anything to do with food sensitivities, but it's really sort of opened my eyes. And like when people say, oh, you know, celiacs should get a subsidy or something like a Medicare rebate because their food's so expensive. After having to cater for a celiac for 2 weeks, yes, definitely put it on Medicare or give them a rebate through the family household assistance or something, because celiacs, it's a medical condition. It's just not like, oh, I don't eat gluten because it makes me bloat. It's a proper medical condition, and it's no different to being diabetic or having any other sort of like medical needs. And gluten-free food is expensive, and it doesn't last the same way that traditional, you know, sort of shelf-stable foods do. Like the bread is just, according to my son, he said it's like eating a dish sponge, except he said it doesn't even soak up the gravy. So like he loves coming home because we just have stock standard white bread and he can eat a loaf by himself in one sitting. But yeah, let's really help out these people who have dietary needs, because that's incredible. It's really opened my eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great segue into actually talking about our food pyramid, because we did have a listener send in a food reel, which was poking fun at the big food companies that we've previously spoken about on the podcast, and being like, well, you had these recommendations. I'll probably try and see if I can pop the reel in here when I'm editing. We'll see how tricky I am, but it'll definitely appear on our socials. But basically they're saying like all the big food companies got together and they were saying you must have a gallon of milk a day and you must eat bread every day. And now it's led to in his words, has now led to a bunch of intolerances. No one can eat gluten, no one can eat dairy, and so it's backfired on the big food companies because it was just maxed out in consumption. So
I don't know how true that is. I don't know that the food pyramid has led to these things. I think back in the day, if you had any sort of food intolerance, you would have just died. Like you would have been like, before people could like even test for these sorts of things, or then you would have been like a baby, and you would have been breastfeeding, whatever, and because there was no formula or anything, and then when you started to eat like whole foods, you just would have sickened and died, and that's just like people explain it away, like, oh, the fairies took them, or failure to thrive and all these sorts of things. So I don't think the food pyramid is directly responsible for that. I think the people that we now see, people living with different food intolerances and those sort of things, is because we have the science to pick them up early in childhood and stuff, and people are not dying from them anymore. And there is such a wide variety of food available now that people can sort of self-regulate, like, oh, I know this doesn't agree with me, so I'll eat this, and it's easy and convenient. So, but the food pyramid is problematic for a lot of different reasons. And yeah, I love my science. So I found a really good book by a really good scientist, and her name is Dr. Emma Beckett, and she has a book currently available said You Are More Than What You Eat. And I downloaded it over the weekend and read it, and it is like the most very simple, plain language explanation of all these sorts of things, and goes into like the human factors involved in healthy diets and that sort of stuff. So jump on any of your major book resellers and find that. You can Google her. You've been on social media, you'll see her. She's the food scientist lady who wears the food themed earrings and dresses. She's super cool. She wears big funky glasses, and this book is just like, if you feel anxious about dieting or food or anything like that, this book will really sort of help you find your own way. Because again, as I've discovered recently, not every diet is fit for every person. And social media is like these wellness influencers. They're little teeny tiny little sexy things, or they're big bulky men, and they're like, oh yeah, you just don't eat sugar and just don't eat vegetables and just eat raw liver, and like that is nonsense for a start. So do not take health advice of someone from the internet unless they're an actual scientific doctor who's a credible source. And there are dietitians and nutritionists out there that are like sensible type people. Don't take, if they're a wellness influencer, please don't take dietary advice from them.
Not at face value, do your research.
At least get a second opinion.
I went down a similar rabbit hole where I went onto Nutrition Australia, and it is, the food pyramid of their recommendation has actually changed. So they updated theirs in 2013. And the Australian government didn't change the adaptation until 2021, which I found was really interesting. But they've definitely changed from that traditional food pyramid we all grow up with into the foundational levels, where they are now recommending that 70% of our diet is made up of fruit, veggies, legumes, herbs, and spices. Nice to see herbs and spices made the list. They didn't last time. I don't know where they thought they were, or maybe they just didn't think they were an important food group. But as we're learning with lots of those micro health biomes and gut health, as we do more research and get more science into it, they are actually quite high impact. So nice to see that they're appearing on the food pyramid. Your middle layer is now still milk, yogurt, dairy, cheese, and it now includes alternatives, which they didn't previously have either. So that would be like your nut milks and nut flours and things like that. And it also includes the meat, poultry, fish, eggs, and seed groups. So that's an interesting adaptation, because I don't think on the traditional one it had the seeds and the nuts either.
No, I'm just trying to think back to like sixth grade, science, where we last looked at the food pyramid, and like obviously the kids have done it, and I've paid very little attention. And I think it's like a broad outline, and this is why education and everything is so important. Like but again, the way our curriculum is structured is that it's just this blanket sort of, yep, curriculum's approved, teach, teach, teach. There's no nuance or anything involved, and there's often no discussion about different dietary needs and those sorts of things. And it's like, you know how much I love social media, but it is also a massive problem. Like, people are like diagnosing themselves with issues, you know, that may or may not exist, but simply just by watching a couple of social media clips and those sorts of things, and then watching a YouTube video from someone who at the end of it will try and sell you something, a supplement or a book or a diet plan or a coaching session. Like, if you really feel like you need that support and advice, seek out a registered nutritionist or dietitian. They do exist, and pay up front and say, here's my $100. I'd like a consultation with you, person who's been to, you know, science school, been to, you know, a proper accredited university and have professional standards, and they will help you. I've worked with a dietitian in the past. We're quite lucky to have one through the RFDS, and they do phone consults and stuff. And, you know, dietitians are worth their weight in gold. You say, oh, well, I live remote, and they go, okay, so here's things that are shelf stable, or here's things that'll last that you can swap out. I don't have a big budget. Okay, well, these things are generally really affordable. You can buy them in bulk and they'll keep. Go and see a registered dietitian if you have any sort of concerns. That would be my advice to you. A proper dietitian, not a social media dietitian. Yeah. One who has like an office and stuff and like a proper certification.
Agree. Absolutely agree. Oh, and when I was rattling off the pyramid, I did forget the top layer. So the top layer is now referring to healthy fats. So it is still recognized that healthy fats does include animal fat, which does help with digestion and brain function. So it's nice to see that animal fat is still being recognized, but it also includes things like extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, and nut and seed oils, as well as fish. So fish, they've popped in 2 layers of the chart. So it'll be interesting to see whether the fish industry had some influence into being in 2 different levels. But I also thought it was interesting that seed oils made the list, because I think in recent times they're discovering that perhaps they aren't the best for us. So it'll be interesting to see the adaptation on that in the future as well.
Yeah, it is really interesting about seed oils, because there's like, I think there's like 2 camps. There's the people who believe that seed oils are the devil, and you should be like rendering down your own tallow from your own grass-fed cows and cooking everything in that. And then there's the group of people who go, oh, well, animal fats are the devil, so everything must come from a plant. But the real thing is that provided you're not chugging it by the gallon out of a bottle, like if you're just putting a couple of tablespoons in a salad dressing, or, you know, putting a little bit in a cake or in your pasta or whatever, I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference, to be honest. If it's only making up that really small part of your diet, I think it doesn't really matter what you eat. If you enjoy it, if it's palatable to you, if it's accessible to you and affordable to you, and it gives you good nutrition, eat what you like.
Yeah, absolutely. So guys, let us know in the comment section below and on the social tiles this week what your thoughts are on the new pyramid, what your thoughts are on the reel, and also whether you are pro or against the new elements of the triangle. It does also come with water recommendations as a side category, so not part of the pyramid itself, but they are still recommending 8 to 12 cups per day.
Which is interesting, because I remember growing up as a kid, like in Midwest Queensland, it was pretty hot. Like, we would go all day without a drink. And when we did have a drink, it was like out of the garden hose. It was like 45 degrees, scalding hot. And we'd be like, and now you can't go anywhere without a water bottle. And you know, when I first started work in office, we had like a water cooler with the little paper cups. And now everyone goes to work and they have their fancy filter water bottle. And so, like, I've got one like right got an ice machine in the background. Like, how did we not all perish to death 20 years ago? It's crazy.
Absolutely. I am definitely a water drinker. I will sip water all day, but my husband is built so differently that he can just go, you know, he'll have his cup when he gets up in the morning, and then he'll have his, you know, a fair bit of water when he gets home in the afternoon. All day he can just work in the heat, and I can't do that. So it's interesting.
Oh, yeah. And then you wonder, like, is their brain a bit dried out? Like, probably not as sharp as you could be because your brain shrunk a little bit from being a bit dehydrated. But, you know, it's where I live, like the big remote areas and the extreme heat, keeping hydrated is like, I make a joke of it and everything, but it's no laughing matter because you can get really unwell really quickly. And it's not unusual for us to go through 10, 20 litres each if we're out, you know, fencing or working cattle and it's really hot, like, and keeping that fresh water up when most of our bore water's not suitable for humans. So we have to cardle that with us. And then it's hot and it's gross and it tastes like, because it's sat in the thing all day and it's just, oh, but you've got to drink it or die.
Yeah, agreed. Now, Gillian, did you have any other comments on the food pyramid?
No, I'm not like, obviously I'm not a big believer in the food pyramid. Like it's like, you know, a good guideline for those people starting out, I guess. And I think it's because nutrition is such big business and there's always this big market in nutritional supplements and wellness coaching and all this sort of thing, diet, exercise, nutrition. It's a massive market. And if you're feeling uncertain, if you want to make changes in your diet, obviously it's a good place to start, but it's not like, not every recommendation is for everybody and it might take you a little while to get it right.
Absolutely agree with that. Now, some of you may have seen if you are registered with New South Wales Farmers, but if you are in other states listening to this, you may not have seen an announcement which came out on Friday, which takes us a little bit back to, I guess, one of the chemical conversations we've had in our previous episode, where they have announced via email that the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicine Authority, so APVMA, has issued an immediate cancellation of the registration and use of all products containing chlorothol. Julian's laughing at me.
Oh, I couldn't pronounce it either.
I'll put it in the comments section. Chlorothol dimethylate, as known as Decothyl or DCPA. So check your chemical sheds, check your property to make sure that you are staying safe and up to
Don't just tip it down the drain. Don't chuck it in your dump. Organise proper removal process. You know, was it drum muster? You guys probably have. Like, we don't have much of it. We don't use any chemicals, like registered chemicals, I guess you could say, because everything's a chemical. But we don't use them up here. So we don't have to have sort of that sort of provision, but down south where we are on our farm in the Flinders Ranges, you have your little chemical bunded thing and drum muster and all that sort of stuff. So do it safely, do it properly. Don't tuck it in the back of the garden shed and save it for a rainy day, because that's just inviting a nightmare. Please don't do that. Follow the regulations, please.
Yes. And if you don't have a drum muster or something like that, contact the person you buy your chemicals off. They'll know where to go and what to do. So I thought I'd do a shout out for that, because if I didn't receive the newsletter about that, I would have no clue. So I thought that maybe some of our listeners wouldn't know either. But that leads us into some of the socials and comments and messaging. Anything on that side, Gillian?
So we've gotten some really good feedback from our social media, especially on Twitter. Big shout out to our handful of followers we've got over there. But they're really nice, really lovely people, and they're really enjoying it so far. And they did make the comment that we talk a lot about, you know, researching, like doing your own research, but how do you identify what is a reliable source? And so it is, and this came, like, this lady who made this comment, she is a scientist, and she's like, yeah, I love to hear you talk about science and stuff. So there's 5 criteria to finding a good source. It's currency, so the timeliness of the information; the relevance, so the importance of the information for your needs; the authority, so the source of the information. So if it's coming from like www.tinfoilhat.com, probably not a great source of authority. The accuracy, so the truthfulness and the correctness of the information. And this one can be a tricky one to determine. So maybe just as a general rule, take everything you read with a grain of salt, because it is the internet and people do lie like shit on there. And purpose, the reason the information exists.
Yeah.
So using those 5 criteria, you can make a good sort of run through about, is this source valuable? Is it going to be, you know, is it telling me pretty much the truth? Is it pretty factual? And like, the purpose this information exists is a good one, because if you watch something or read something and at the end it says, click here for my special offer, or book now for a one-on-one coaching session at a discounted rate, like, just be I'm not saying that all people who advertise in that way are charlatans, but it is something to be aware of, that they may be presenting information in a way favourable to themselves to bring themselves business, which is advertising in a nutshell. But just be aware that that happens. And and read and learn and listen to as much different stuff as you can. And, it is hard to find what is a reliable source. So, just be aware that those 5 criteria exist and apply them when you're reading or listening or watching something, even us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And over on YouTube, we've had over 3,000 views to the site, which is very exciting to see those insights coming in as well. And we did have Dan mention over on our socials as well that while they haven't been part of the farming industry for over a decade now, it seems that the government does seem to hate the primary producers, and it does seem that the distance of non-agricultural people are from their food source like they're getting bigger from their food source, and eventually, if we continue down this path, there will only be foreign-owned factories and farms left.
Oh, that last one. We're going to have to dig into that one deeper, I think, because that's an interesting point. And, there's a lot of polarizing opinions on that, in Australian agriculture about the pros and cons of foreign investment and those sorts of things. That's a very interesting thing. We'll definitely do that. And I also did on the socials, on the Twitter account, asked if we should do a special Ag Day event, Ag Day podcast, and it was taken up pretty positively that we should do that. So I think we might look into doing that and talking about how many people we actually feed and clothe, and the importance of agriculture. So I think that would be a really nice way to highlight. And, we're all about building bridges and bringing urban audiences into our world. So I think that would be a really good one to cover.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So should we jump into solar panels?
Yeah, let's talk about renewable energy, because, again, polarizing, isn't it? It's like, what do you do? Because a lot of people who are really, really for renewable energy projects on agricultural land don't actually own any agricultural land. And they're usually the ones voting for and making these rules. Yeah, not in my backyard. Like, don't go and build a big heap of wind turbines off Bondi Beach because it'll ruin my view. But by all means, let's tie up prime agricultural land, because I never go out there and look at it anyway. So, let's talk. What did you discover, Katja, when you were researching renewable energy projects?
So when this topic was first brought to my mind, my attention, when it was first brought to my attention, it was the images of solar panel graveyards and landfill in similar context to like the big jumbo jets being dumped in the middle of the desert. Like, that's what was brought to my attention, and people wanted to know more about the solar panels and whether it was just another plan that the government and authorities have not thought out, like what happens when the solar panel can no longer be used, and what that means. So solar panels started taking off in popularity in about the 2000s as a renewable energy source. Initially, they were being dumped straight into landfill and into these dumping sites, which began causing concern to the public, which it still is now. And because of the chemicals and the metals that were leaching out and contaminating the soil, the runoff, and the water supplies around these areas. So a lot of landfill now, particularly if they are registered landfill, actually have, catchment water systems and things like that to make sure that it's not leaching into the environment, which I don't know if they had those back in the 2000s. But they are starting some solar panel recycled plants. So yes, they are few and far between, and yes, they are expensive. But what they do is they remove the layer of acetate and glass, because all of it's glued together. So a solar panel, everything is glued together, including the aluminium frame. And that's the process that makes it really hard to recycle, is trying to extract those elements back out of it. Because if they have any cross-contamination, they cannot recycle those products. But what they are trying to pull out of it in the recycling is copper aluminium, tin, silicon, and silver, as well as the glass. So once it's in its purified form, they can recycle that. The technology to do that is still developing, and it is super expensive. On average, if you want to dump a solar panel, it's around $2 to $5. If you want to recycle a solar panel, it is up to $45 per solar panel to recycle. Like, that is massive. Who is going to cover that cost if we're going to recycle it?
And I just, if people want to listen to this, and I don't know if people will, but I just want to make it really clear, we are not anti-renewable energy. I rely on it here to power my house, and we use it for a lot of our water pumps. We're what you'd probably call early adopters when it came to solar energy. Like, we moved into solar power for our pumps really quickly, especially when the price of diesel went up. And, you know, they're a lot lower maintenance. They're a lot easier to install than a diesel generator. You know, there's a lot less moving parts, all that sort of stuff. So we think solar power is the business. Never had much to do with wind power, but there's a really big wind, like, power thing down near where my mum and dad live. I drive past it, you know, every 6 to 8 weeks. It seems to be doing its job. But again, it's like, I don't think policymakers can learn from the past. And this is a big concern because, you know, we have oil and coal and gas, right? And they all produce waste. And what have we been doing with that? Just pumping it willy-nilly out into the environment. And that's what's led us to this point we are now. Okay, so renewable energy is going to save the world. Great. It has a definitive lifespan. What are we going to do with that when it expires? And it seems like no one's gone, oh, well, you know, we made a massive problem last time by not thinking about end of life or waste. But this is so urgent. And so, you know, oh, we'll just figure it out. No one's investing in it. No one's figuring it out. It's just like, we'll just, you know, that's someone else's problem. That's the next election cycle to worry about. And the concerns that I personally have is the impact these projects and the end of life have on the farmland on which it's built. Because if these panels do leach chemicals and undesirable chemicals and those sorts of things back into the soil, and then they say, okay, so we're going to then take this solar park down because it hasn't, you know, it's reached the end of its life and it's not efficient anymore. And then you want to go back to using that land for productive agriculture. What effect is that going to have? Is that going to be then like an old petrol station? Are you going to have to cut it out of your farm forever? Who's doing soil testing? Who's responsible for the soil testing? What, you know, compensation is available? What about food security in the future if we've used up all our productive farming land? Because it seems really popular to build these projects on really good value farming land because they're close to urban centres and so transmission is cheaper. I don't think they fully thought this through, and that's a concern because, you know, a lot of these projects are going to start reaching the end of their life soon. So probably should have thought about that before we built it. And that's not to say, oh, well, you shouldn't just do it. Yeah, you can do something, but you should think about how you're going to wind it up. It's, yeah, this lack of forethought and lack of investment by the government, essentially, because they're the ones driving this renewable energy sort of flurry, you know, it's going to lead us to, I think, another problem like we're having with fossil fuels. We're going to like end up with all this waste and nowhere to put it, not worry what to do with it. There's a lot of valuable resources tied up in it, and we're just going to chuck it in a hole in the desert, and that's a worry.
Yes. If you're listening and you have been working on the solution or you know someone who has been, please jump on, please comment, because this is the concern of why this was brought to our attention, why it was brought on as a discussion point, because as Gillian said, end of life, what is the long-term plan? Where are we ending up with this? Something else that I thought was really interesting while I was doing some research on this is what they are predicting is that by 2030, it is established that there will be 80 million tonnes of trashed solar panels, which is the equivalent of $20 billion. So that is massive statistics within itself. But then to build the solar panels, we'd need to power the world under their current predictions and structure and what they're driving towards. We actually, as not only a country of Australia, but as the world, do not have enough silver reserves to be able to do that. So what is the long-term planning and thoughts on that as well? If we're going to need to transition to solar panel, if it is the ultimate goal and our ultimate renewable energy, we're going to run out of products that we need to make it. So are we pivoting to make them out of different materials, or what else are we trying to recycle to get the silver to continue making them for their predictions, for what we need to do to run off them?
And in the meantime, where are we going to get the power to do all this? Because a lot of this is heavy industry that needs a lot of baseload power. So that means we're going to burn more gas, more oil, more coal to make more solar panels. Okay, cool. But then moving forwards, then you're going to need more energy to recycle the solar panels. And I'm not saying that any of this shouldn't happen. I want to have confidence that someone's at least thought about it and we have a bit of a plan, because on the ground, it seems like energy companies, they get all sorts of assistances and stuff from governments to go out and build all these projects on people's land. And the landholder gets a lease fee or whatever, which is great. If you can make money out of something on your land, that's your business, go ahead and do it. But then what happens when that's over? Who's then left carrying the can for the rehab, for the recycling? And if it is this sort of like greater good type thing, because I believe everyone in Australia should have access to affordable, reliable energy, because that's part of living in a first world nation. So if that's part of it, where's the government budgeting for it? Where's the CSIRO investigating it? You know, where's the grants and all this sort of stuff? Like, we invest billions of dollars in research in climate change. And so they've said, okay, well, to fight climate change, then we need to invest in renewable energy. Okay, great. Invest in some research in renewable energy in different methods, because solar panels and wind, there might be another technology out there that we don't know about yet, because no one's investing in researching that. And if someone is investing in that and researching that, that's great. Tell us, because we never get to hear about it. So I would just love to know that there's a plan beyond the next flurry of energy companies getting lots of money to build shit.
Yeah.
What's going to happen after that? That's what worries me.
We'd love to know, guys. Let us know. Link away, keep commenting.
Tell us we're wrong. We might be, because, don't know anything about solar power or anything like that. But no, it is a big concern. And it's one of those things that, we need a national plan for this. We need a national agriculture plan that then talks to the national energy plan that says, okay, you want to keep feeding people and keep up our agricultural exports to keep us, in the black as a nation. Stop taking prime agricultural land to generate energy, and stop doing stuff in silos, and stop making harebrained announcements to win elections. Just, make a bit of a plan, a nation building plan. I think that's where the state of Australia at the moment is that we haven't had people who've just gone, what, we really need to make a plan to get Australia like set for the future. It's like they stopped building stuff in the 70s and went, done, Australia's right, job's good, got plenty of factories, plenty of coal mines. And then for the next 40 odd years, we've just gone downhill. We're sending all our minerals offshore, exporting all our gas and not getting any money for it, which is crazy. It's just, come on, guys, you're the government. This is literally your job.
100%. And they've sort of gone from more of the big picture and positivity for the nation back down to trying to please subgroups. And we're not building the country, as you said, as a whole. I know that we all need to be looked at as individual industries and in individuals as well, but where's the long-term planning? Where's the big picture? Where's the safety, the security, the finance, all of that?
And if there is a big picture, like if there is a big master plan out there, could someone please share it with us? Because I've got concerns. If it's just a secret document that people keep referring to, then I'm not very happy about that. I would like to have the opportunity to have some input into that.
And I'm sure our listeners would as well. So, guys, that is wrapping up episode 8 of Absolutely Fabulous for this week. Gillian, did you have anything you wanted to end on?
Well, we did talk last week about making the merchandise. There is a poll at the moment up on Twitter, and there will be one on Instagram about what sort of merchandise you'd like to see us make. So the current options are stickers, apparel, so hats and T-shirts, enamel pins. So if you've been watching our socials, you would have seen the little birds that are representative of Katja and I. So, maybe those as a little enamel pin might be a bit fun, or all of the above. are the 4 options at the moment. So if you have any suggestions or preferences, please let us know.
Absolutely. And guys, if you are listening to this for the first time, that was back in last week's episode, so episode 7, where we're going to roll out some merch by around Mother's Day next year. So we'll have everything up and running by then. So jump on those polls, have your say. As always, love to see you in our socials, love to see you interact, whether you agree with us, whether you don't agree with us, or whether or not you have some topics, research, or anything else that you want us to discuss. Please jump over there. That's how you get in contact with us.
And we love it.
So we'll talk to you all in another episode next week. Thanks, guys. Bye.